Such an honor to have you with us. Before we get started talking about all the great impact you've made in the world, let's get into your early life. Let's get into your childhood. You mentioned in the book that you were never white enough to be white or black enough to be black. You were a brown girl in a black and white world. Welcome to my world, by the way. All right, but
yes.
Talk to us about that. You're an immigrant's daughter from India, and so tell us about your upbringing.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a small rural southern town in South Carolina. Oh, we got some South Carolina peeps in the house. I love that. And so, you know, bottom line, we were the only Indian family in that small southern town. We weren't white enough to be white. We weren't black enough to be black. My father wore a turban. He still does to this day. My mother wore a sari. They didn't know who we were, what we were, or why we were there. And I remember when I would come home from school after being on the playground and being bullied, my mom would always say, your job is not to show them how you're different. Your job is to show them how you're similar. And it's amazing how that lesson on the playground really carried with me, whether it was the corporate world, whether as governor, whether as ambassador, because when you're faced with a challenge, if you first talk about the things you agree on, everyone lets their guard down, and then you can actually get to the true challenge and reach a solution in the process.
So begin by finding commonality, build the bridge. How did something that you went through, whether it was being bullied, which you were as a child, or anything else, how did that principle that maybe you learned as a child get applied as our ambassador?
You know, I think mainly it was understanding the pain of it, the pain of being different, the pain of having people judge you based on something you can't change. And I think that when I was ambassador, you feel people's pain, and you don't want anyone to feel like they don't deserve human dignity and they don't deserve to have true self-worth. And so it makes you fight for people more. It makes you fight for their existence. It makes you fight for their respect, and it makes you fight because they are a child of God and deserve that.
And the ironic thing is conservative Christians now are a group that's targeted and persecuted, and it was you know, in the past it was more along racial, ethnic lines, and it's amazing how much the world's changed. I mean,
well, and that was a lot of who we had to fight for. I mean, around areas in the world, Christians are persecuted and Christians are discriminated against. And a lot of our fight that we had at the UN was making sure that we had the resources to fight for them and the protections to defend them.
The reason a lot of these students are here is because the schools, their state schools where they come from, have speech codes, and they ridicule conservative Christians for saying something in class that's not politically correct. And so it's just it's not just one group that's put through that. But first of all, welcome to Liberty University, and we honored to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here. This is pretty impressive. You've got a good-looking group here.
Well, we played BYU on Saturday, and we lost 31-24. And the president there was telling me that their ROTC program, I think I already told this the other day. Yeah, they almost lost it until Trump came in office. And so a lot of what's happened since the president became president is the kinds of changes that you've advocated for. You know, you've been pro-life, strongly pro-life. You've been strongly for this.
You know, and I'll tell you, I always tell people I'm pro-life not because the Republican Party tells me to be pro-life. Mm-hmm. I'm pro-life because I understand the value of life. My husband was adopted, and I thank God every day that he was saved. I had trouble having both of my children. And when you go and see where freedom is non-existent around the world and life is not valued, it makes you hold on to it that much more.
And in the state of Israel, you've been one of their biggest advocates, our #1 ally in the Middle East, and with moving the capital to Jerusalem, and with the BDS movement, and we appreciate all that. But you also were CFO of a company. Was it a company your family owned, or was it?
Yes, our family had their own business.
How long did you do that?
So my parents started a business out of the living room of their home. 30 plus years later, it was a multi-million-dollar company. But partially through that process, my mom had a bookkeeper that was leaving, and she had to train someone. And she told my mom, she said, we need to hurry up and find someone to train to do the books. I happened to be walking by, and my mom grabbed my arm and she said, train her, she can do it. And she said, but she's 13. And my mom said, train her. And so at 13, I was balancing the bank account, I was doing the expenses, I was dealing with the CPA and the auditors and all of that. And it was at that point that I learned the value of $1. And it was at that point that I knew that when businesses go through hard times, you get creative, you stretch, and you make it count. And during the good times, you didn't celebrate because you knew the tough times would happen again. So I actually grew up in that family business, and that is the reason why I ended up becoming an accountant, because I had a love of numbers.
Liberty is based on that too. That's why we treat it as a business, and Jerry runs it as a business because he was around for the tough times. And so he knows what it's like to go to bed on Friday night and not know who's going to pay the bills over the weekend, and he has to call people and hope.
Not anymore, but for 20
Not anymore,
for
but
20
he
years.
did it.
But you never forget that feeling.
That's right. He never forgot.
stays
and
with
that's why
you.
he still remembers it now. And
true.
that's a great lesson. A lot of students haven't been through suffering or anything. So politics isn't quite as important to them as it is to us, because once you start paying your bills and you see the government is getting most of your money, you're going to start thinking about who you're voting for when you go through the voting booth.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, we really did have to. We issued paychecks on Friday, and my father and I would be on the phone all weekend calling donors and lenders. We got to have $1 million by Monday to cover the checks. And so, if Monday came and we didn't get them covered, we'd cover them on Tuesday, and somehow we always made it work. But it's just a miraculous story where Liberty's come since then. But in 2008, when Barack Obama won the presidency for the first time against John McCain, I told everybody, I said, there's never going to be a moderate establishment Republican who can beat a liberal Democrat for the presidency again. And they tried it again in 2012 with Mitt Romney. And again, but the people got smart. In 2016, they decided to choose a populist, somebody who was not a career politician. And I want to congratulate you for having the wisdom to see that change. And in your book, you talk about how John Kelly, Rex Tillerson, lots of deep state people really run the government. And the president tried for a year to fire the ambassador to Ukraine who testified this morning, and they wouldn't. His own State Department wouldn't do it. And so, I just think you're on the right track. You've with what you've said in your book and with the positions you've taken, you're going to be seen as somebody who's not part of the old guard Republicans who betrayed conservatives like us so many times over the last four decades. And so my hat's off to you for that.
Well, thank you very much. You learn early on, especially growing up in a small business or growing up in a small town, that people need to know the power of their voice and they need to be able to use it. And elected officials need to know to listen to them. And every one of you has that power. And it's a power that you should hold very dear. And when you see something wrong, you should say it. And when you see the grain going this way, that doesn't mean you need to go that way. I think basically one of the stories in the book I talk about is when you had two senior level members within the administration, the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the Secretary of State at the time, Rex Tillerson. We had a disagreement. They pulled me to the side and they said, look, we're trying to save the country and we need you to join us with that. It's not that they thought the president was unfit or rogue. They disagreed with him on policy. And the problem with that is when the American people elect a president, they elect him because of what he says he's going to do. And for others to come in that are unelected, to go and think they know better than him, it's not only against the Constitution, it's against the people who elected him. And so at that point, I certainly wasn't going to work with him because they disagreed with him on things like pulling out of the Iran deal, pulling out of Paris Climate Agreement, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. These were policy issues that he ran on. These were policy issues that he was trying to implement. But it goes to show that when people do try and push you in a certain direction, trust your gut, go to that core, and make sure you do what is right. My loyalty was to the president and to the American people. And at the end of the day, that's where we need to be, regardless of what other egos are in the room trying to get you to go the other way.
One of the things that's, it's really great. One of the phrases that you've coined is kick with a smile. Like literally the subtitle of the book is Grace and Grit. And I think you're such an example of holding fast to your convictions, having the grit, but yet at the same time, always not letting disagreement become an opportunity for disrespect. Talk to us about kick with a smile. You even talk about just having high heels and fighting the good fight.
Well, I think a lot of that is you can be tough, but you don't have to be hateful. You can be tough and you can be respectful. And I'll tell you, the first time I actually learned that, I was right out of college. It was my first job. I was an accounting supervisor for a company and 6 of their subsidiaries, and I was the only female executive at the time. And they had, everybody had come into a morning meeting and we were all in the boardroom and the president was running late. And so we're chatting, and then all of a sudden the president comes in 10 minutes later, and the CFO at the time says, "Nikki, why don't you get Paul a cup of coffee?" And I remember thinking at that time, I didn't know what I was gonna do, but how I handled that would dictate how they treated me going forward. And I said, absolutely, I would be happy to. And I leaned over to the phone and I called my assistant and I said, "Pam, would you please get Paul a cup of coffee?"
You delegated.
They never asked me to do that again. So, the lesson is that you can make your point without, really creating a large fuss about it. And I think that there are times and places where you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to know that even in the most intimidating situations, the way you conduct yourself literally will dictate how everybody else conducts themselves with you going forward.
What would you have done, Becky?
Well, if you were the president in this situation, which you would have been, I definitely would have gotten your coffee, but that's just, you're my husband, and yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay.
You have to get your
That's
own
why they
coffee.
have me up here, to keep him under control. Nikki and I decided we need an electric shocker under his seat, and I could just sit right there. Sorry.
I don't think it would work, but
He would move seats. He would just change his chair.
we were at a party the other night, Wednesday night, with it's Don Jr.'s book signing party, and I noticed you supported Marco Rubio, and then Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz was there, and he and I had a nice chat, and I asked him if the reason he grew a beard was because I did. He said, "Yeah, that was the reason, Jerry." I said, and I said I didn't believe it. I'm sure he was joking, but anyhow, it's just. I got a lot of grief for supporting President Trump, and a lot of it was from Cruz supporters because they didn't understand the president, and because of his mannerisms and his way, they didn't think he would be really strong on issues that were important to the average Americans. And I think everywhere I go, people who are on the fence and maybe didn't vote last time have now come across, and I think you're in that category. You've been discussed as one of the perfect candidates for national office for years. In I guess both in 2012 and 2016. No, it was two different election cycles but you made it clear that you had already made a commitment to the people of South Carolina and you were going to stay there. And I admire you for that, but at some point, you got to step out a little bit.
Well, there was an interesting situation on how the president and I decided to work together. So I actually knew the president a few years prior. When I ran for governor the first time and won the primary, this envelope showed up, and it had this great gold trim on it. And inside was a support check, and there was a note that said, "You're a winner." And so fast forward, we stayed in touch, and we're acquaintances through there. Fast forward to the 2016 Republican primary. A lot of talent on that stage. 16 people were there. And I endorsed a different candidate. I endorsed Marco Rubio, in which the president then tweeted, "Nikki Haley is an embarrassment to South Carolina." And I responded in a tweet that said, "Bless your heart." So
That's grace and grit right there. Hashtag grace and grit.
So wait.
Hashtag kick with a smile.
So then the president ended up winning the primary. I ended up supporting him in the general. And then Reince Priebus, his chief of staff, called and said, "Nikki, the president wants to see you." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "He wants to talk to you about Secretary of State." And I said, "Reince, I can't be Secretary of State. I'm a governor." And he said, "Well, he wants to see you. I need you to come meet with him tomorrow." So I went to meet with the president. I walk in the door, and the first thing he says is, "Well, I guess your guy didn't win."
He remembers everything.
Go very easily.
He doesn't forget anything.
And so then I went and I said, "Look, I'm not your person. We've got a lot going on in the world, and I think that, you need someone that doesn't need a learning curve, but I'm here to help you, and I will support in any way that I can." So I leave, go back to the job I loved, serving the state that raised me. Fast forward to the end of the week, Reince calls again, and he said, "Okay, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations." I said, "Reince, I don't even know what the United Nations does. I just know everybody hates it." And he said, "Well, the president's going to call you on Monday. You need to be ready." The president called on Monday, and he said, "All right, Nikki, are you going to do this?" And I said, I've been a governor. I don't want to work for anyone else. I would want to work directly with you. So it needs to be a cabinet position." He said, "Done." And I said, "Well, I'm a policy girl, and I'd want to be in the room when decisions were made, so I would need to be on the National Security Council." He said, "Done." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to be a wallflower or a talking head. I need to be able to say what I think." And that's when he said, "That's exactly why I want you to do this." And he was true to his word from the first day till the very last day.
When Don Jr. was here Wednesday, we were joking about his appearance on The View, and I have to ask you, what do you think's worse, appearing on The View or appearing before the UN General Assembly? General Counsel, what's it?
They are truly very similar. You are going obviously into enemy territory, and it's rapid fire from everywhere else. So yeah, they're actually really similar.
You were one of only 13 countries who voted against the death penalty for adultery, blasphemy, homosexuality, and a lot of, did I get that right? In a lot of countries.
I mean, I don't know how many countries there were, but at the time it was, the death penalty, this was something where they were wanting to use the death penalty against those that had different sexual preferences.
Anyway, I just want to say that we, this student body, you've got to be one of their favorites. Who do you think is your favorite candidate after 2020? Kanye West. Oh, well. No, but David's right. We have gotten more requests to have you at Visit Liberty than any other politician. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons our students are so drawn to your leadership is because of a moment where we saw you be very vulnerable and honest. What you've said was the toughest moment as governor of the state of South Carolina. Will you talk to us a little bit about the tragic shooting and how that affected you. We just watched you lead, and you led, and God used you to be a healer. And so talk to us a little bit about that moment.
Well, it was a very tough moment for the people of South Carolina and actually the people of the country. I mean, here you had 12 people who do what so many South Carolinians do every Wednesday night. They went to Bible study. But on this night, someone else showed up. He didn't look like them, he didn't act like them, he didn't sound like them. But they didn't throw him out, they didn't call the cops. Instead, they pulled up a chair and prayed with him for an hour. And when he went in for his last breath, and the last prayer that they bowed their heads, he started to shoot. These were people like Ethel Lance, who had lost her daughter 2 years prior to breast cancer, and she had a broken heart. But she would go around Mother Emanuel Church cleaning, singing, "One day at a time, sweet Jesus, that's all I ask of you. Give me the strength to do every day what I have to do." Our youngest victim, Tywanza Sanders, had just graduated from college, had the world in front of him. And on that night, he stood in front of his 87-year-old great Aunt Susie and said to the killer, "You don't have to do this. We mean no harm to you." Or it was people like Cynthia Hurd, who simply had a life motto, to be kinder than necessary. That's who these people were. They weren't famous, but they loved their family, they loved their church, and they loved their community. And we found the state of South Carolina fell to her knees. It was the first time we had had a shooting in a place of worship. And 2 days later, the killer appeared before the judge, and the families were there. And unprompted, unrehearsed, one at a time, those family members stood in front of the killer and forgave him. It was such a powerful moment that through all of their pain, they still had the faith to forgive him. So in South Carolina, we held tight, we held strong. We didn't have riots, we had vigils. We didn't have protests, we had hugs. And we went through a tough month in terms of debating the Confederate flag, but we held together, we held strong, and the Confederate flag came down.
Yeah. What did that represent, that moment? Because obviously that was not a popular choice by some of the people that you represented, and it was for some others. And you were just navigating through that moment as a leader, trying to serve all the people. You were not calling someone who was for the Confederate flag, remaining on a flagpole, hateful. You understood that was heritage for them, but at the same time, the nation needed healing. Your state needed healing.
Well,
so walk us through that moment.
Well, the other side of that was right after the murders happened, the killer came out with a manifesto, and there he was holding the Confederate flag. That's what brought the whole issue up. And so naturally, when all of this happened, the media came in trying to take over. They wanted to define the moment. They wanted to talk about racism. They wanted to talk about the death penalty. They wanted to talk about guns. They wanted, and I really did strong arm them and say, there will be a time and place where we can have these debates, but right now we're going to be with the families. We're going to get them through the funerals. We're going to lift them up. And so that issue of the Confederate flag, for so many South Carolinians, was not about hate. It was about heritage. It was about sacrifice. It was about service. And so for them, but once he held up that flag, he hijacked that from them. And so what we wanted was for the Confederate flag to be put in a respectful place, which is why we had it moved to the museum. But it was tough. It was having to talk through with the people of South Carolina and let them know that this was a time we didn't need to fall apart. We needed to hold tight. We needed to keep our faith strong, and we needed to move through this together for the good of everyone. And I think the people of South Carolina stepped up in a way and showed the world what dealing with tragedy with true faith and prayer looks like.
I think it's fitting that a Republican governor was the one who led on that issue, because it was the Southern Democrats who supported segregation, Jim Crow laws, slavery.
They're the ones that put the flag up there to start with.
Of course. And the Republicans were always, I'm proud that my family was one of the few Republican families back in the 20s and 30s in this area. You could put all the Republicans in a phone booth around Lynchburg in those days. And my grandfather hired more African Americans than any other company. He had a lot of companies than any other companies in town. And it's just, it's been flipped on its head. The schools act like the Democrats got the Civil Rights Act passed. It was the Republicans that got it passed. And I just think that's something that somehow we got to educate the populace, especially young people, on.
It's very true.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Can you, yes, yeah. Can you tell us, in moments like that, and I know you're always so vulnerable and honest, you're so not political when it comes to these moments. Ambassador Haley, Nikki, tell us about your faith. You're a sister in Christ. Moments like that, you wake up with the tragedy, a hate crime, in the very place that you're serving. How does your faith in those kind of moments come into play?
It was really all I had at that moment. I mean, if you go and you read in the book, you'll find that through it all, I attended every one of the funerals. They were all open casket. So we watched the families fall over in desperation over the bodies. I knew what had happened to that in that room when the murders happened, and I developed post-traumatic stress disorder. And it was something that was very difficult. I didn't let anyone know at the time, but I would go out and do a press conference, and I would come back into the office and I would cry. I would go and deal with an issue with the state, and I'd come home and I'd just get in the bed, and I knew something was very wrong. And my husband knew something was very wrong. And that's when a doctor, our friend and a doctor, said, look, you're showing strong signs of PTSD. And I felt so desperate at the time. And the one thing that I will say saved me was my faith, because that's when I really just threw it in God's hands and said, I need to be lifting up the people of South Carolina. I need you to get me through this. And I think that that's really the moment where I felt my faith grow to something so much bigger than me, and something where you just say, God will strengthen me through this. And again, be strong and be courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, and He will protect you.
What advice do you have for young people? We're talking to 18 to 22-year-olds, maybe women especially. Like what do they do if they have that urge and that feeling they're called to do something in politics or run for governor? Everything you've done, tell us a little bit about how you accomplish so much, and then give us all advice on what to do.
My mom always said, whatever you do, be great at it and make sure people remember you for it. And I think that that's the first thing, is make the most of today. But when challenges come in front of you, learn to push through the fear. Whenever something was presented to me, your nature is to step back and analyze the situation. But when you push forward and you push through the fear, you find out you're so much stronger on the other side. If I didn't push through the fear, I wouldn't have been a legislator. If I didn't push through the fear, I would never have run for governor. If I didn't push through the fear, I wouldn't have become ambassador. And what if I wouldn't have pushed through the fear? Look at how much of my life I wouldn't have had, and there would have been nothing but regret. And so I think you have to really have faith in yourself and a gut that allows you to push forward. If you know you're doing it for the right reasons, if you know you're doing it to serve your fellow Americans and really do something that's going to make the world better, you have to push. We need you to push. We need more women in office. We're 51% of the population. We've got to see more women in office.
I think the average female to male ratio in colleges now is 60% female, 40% male. You guys are taking over the world.
Well, and I'll go back and quote Margaret Thatcher. No offense to you fellas, but it was Margaret Thatcher that said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
There's a few exceptions to that, though.
Bless their heart. Let's end our time in prayer. I really mean this. I think this, even now, just hearing you be honest and vulnerable about just dealing with overwhelming stress in your life, I think that just makes you more human. And we don't look for politicians that pretend to be perfect. We look for people who are people, who want to lead people to a better day, a safer place, a healing environment. And so we're thankful for you, but there's so much stress on your life. You're also, just a person who's a part of a family. Then you have all the responsibilities on you. How can we pray for you? I want you to know, these students mean it. We're going to put you on our prayer list. When we see you on the news, we're going to be praying for you, asking the Lord for you. How can we put you on our prayer list? What's something right now that we can be asking the Lord for your family?
Well, I think always just strength and peace are the two things that I always pray for. And, I have a son that's a senior in high school and a son and a daughter that's a senior in college.
They're going to need to come to Liberty University. Don't you think that we need to have those kids at Liberty?
So strength and peace are something that I always pray for.
She's a big Clemson fan, y'all. She texts.
Go Tigers.
She texts Coach Sweeney plays and suggestions on how to win the game. Right?
My husband's so embarrassed. I have texted Dabo before every game for years. And my husband's embarrassed because I do give him football advice when I text him. And so I'll say, Dabo, you're not doing enough to protect Sunshine, who's our quarterback. Or Dabo, what was the defensive line doing? I'll always say these types of things. And so I've done it every game for years, and he's always had one response: go Tigers. That's literally all he says.
Well, apparently it's working because you won the national championship. We need to give you our coach's cell phone number so you can text our coach.
But when I left the United Nations, he sent me a text. He said, I may have a coaching position available. And I said, be careful what you ask for. So,
well, if he keeps winning at the rate that he's winning, I feel like he's more and more qualified to one day be Alabama's coach. So tell him he's doing a good job, all right?
We're not giving him up.
Hey,
let's pray for Nikki. Yeah.
Also, one other, David, during your prayer, I know your father has had health issues this week. And please, the students, if they keep David's father in mind. And also, Benjamin, Liberty's favorite guy right here, Benjamin Nasser. He turned, woo! He turned 40 this week. Have we sang happy birthday to Benjamin?
Can we sing happy? Yes, he turned 40 this week.
Have we done that this week?
Yeah. All right, yeah, absolutely.
Let's sing a quick happy birthday,
You want to sing
but
happy birthday
I'm not going to
Benji?
lead it.
Okay, let's do it. Thanks, Becky. Ready? Happy birthday, buddy. We love you.
We love you, Benji.
Let's do this. Since we're on this, Benji, come on up real quick and pray over Senator Haley. Come on up and pray.
Yeah.
He wants to pray for you. He loves you, by the way. He was so excited this morning. He's not been feeling his best, but when he found out you're here, he was like, I'm coming. All right, so come on up real quick and pray over Senator Haley. We'll close in prayer. Do you like her outfit, by the way? Those are Georgia colors, all right? So those are not Clemson colors.
I think they're Liberty.
They're Liberty colors. That's right. We got that red.
Also, Hannah Blair's here with her husband. She's a 2017 Liberty graduate, member of the track team, and she's done an incredible job in Washington writing for all sorts of people. One of the books she just finished, about to finish, is for Sean Spicer. I saw Sean the other night. I told him, I said, you need to call that book Tiny Dancer. And she liked the idea. He's on Dancing with the Stars.
He just got kicked off this morning.
Yeah.
How are you? Good to see you.
Benji's going to pray for us, all right, and close us in prayer.
Father God, we come before you to bow before ourselves and thank you that you died to forgive us, not because of our righteousness, but because of your righteousness. Thank you for this day. We praise you and thank you for her job, for her health, for her well-being. Lord, I pray that you would be with her all the days of her life as she's going back to work. That she will not worship her job, but worship only you and you alone. That you will bless her family emotionally, financially, and spiritually. I pray for the Trumps. That you bless them and let them know they're loved by you, Lord. Thank you for these beautiful people here, Lord. I pray that they would come to know you as Savior, Lord. I pray those who don't just hear my voice, they will just hear your voice. We love you, Father, because we want to be obedient to you. Thank you for this state. I pray that one day when she gets older, and she will watch her generations grow. We bring all these things in your name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Can we one more time? Thanks, Ambassador Haley, for being our honored guest. Her book.
Good to see
Her
you
book
guys.
is for sale, by the way. Today, listen, her book is for sale for $5 for you, all right? So it's over there. Go grab it and support her. God bless you guys. We love you.